Hey knitters, welcome to the Knitting 411 podcast. Oh, I think I'm muted. Let's try it again.
There we go. Is the sound all right? Can everybody hear me? Welcome to the Knitting 411 podcast. Welcome to those who are here now and to those who will watch the replay where we discuss knitting and answer your knitting questions. I'm Tanya. I'm a knitwear designer and a knitting instructor. And I live in Canada. And we've got Kaz here. She's from South Yorkshire, England. Hey, Kaz. So let's get started with some knitting news. I recently came across this website, the Glove Collection. There, let me see if I can, there we go. That's better. I've been working on an upcoming episode or an upcoming video for the YouTube channel. I thought I would discuss the Outlander knitting patterns and some of my favorites and what knitting was like in that time period in the early 1700s. So I've been doing some research about that. And I ran across this website called the Glove Collection, and they've got, let me see here. I took some notes about it. 2,300 different items. And it began in 1993 when it was established as a charity to advance public education in the historical, social, and artistic value of gloves. And some of their items are on display at the Fashion Museum in Bath, but they also loan them to other museums. And they have a lot of the pictures online of the different gloves in the collection. And there's some that are woven in different fabrics, but there's also knit gloves. So if you like a peek at what knitting was like, even in the not so distant past, they have more recent things from the 60s and so, but they also have some further back. So I've been looking at different things that would have been knit in the 18th century, and I came across a few. This pair of mittens, they don't know exactly where they came from or who knit them, but I think they're beautiful. You can see the detail in that work and how fine a gauge that was. Let me see. This was their fingerless mitts. They're pointed top, and they sort of sit on the back of your palm, and your fingers are, and your thumb is exposed. But they are knit in silk and cotton, and they've got a design of carnations and pomegranates worked in yellow and white and green silks on the front. And I thought they're just beautiful, really intricate, detailed work. And they also have menswear gloves. Now that is some fancy color work from the same time period. They also, they don't know where they originated from, but the designs, I don't know. I think the designs on both of these are definitely sort of European inspired, maybe. I'm not sure where. They're very colorful and they're beautiful. These are cream knitted silk, and they've got scrolling carnations, tulips, foliage, small birds, and beasts worked in green, pink, blue, and yellow silk. So I thought those were just really interesting. So let me get back over here. So that's just something I've discovered recently. So if you're interested in learning more about gloves through the centuries, I'll have a link to that website down below after this live stream is over. But I just finished a video, it'll be out on Friday, about the knitting in all creatures great and small. And I started doing some research for Outlander, which is a really popular show with knitters. There's groups on Ravelry, there's knitting books with the design. So I was really interested to learn more about the history of knitting and what they were knitting in the 1700s. And those gloves are an example of something that would have been knit then, but not exactly in the Scottish Highlands, which probably the knitting was very different there. But I'm doing some more research and we'll look into that. And I'd love to know if there's a show that you love the knitwear on that, and if you'd like to discuss that show. I'm always looking for new ideas for videos. Hey, Marina, you're joining me again. And Kaz, you've been to Banff. Oh, I've never been out there. And yes, mug root beer is great. That's a great comment. Okay, so that's it for the things I've been looking at, the knitting chat and news. I have been working on some knitting. Let me put that, change my screen a bit here. And while I'm pulling out mine, why don't you tell me what you've been knitting? Kaz already has. She has been knitting a blanket and dishcloth and trying to knit a shawl in cotton acrylic yarn. So she's been busy. Anybody else? working on
any interesting knitting projects?
There we go.
I haven't been doing a lot of knitting. I've been doing some designing. I just submitted a few patterns to Knitty. If you're familiar with that website, they have their quarterly or so releases, and you can submit designs there. So I sent in the pattern for these socks, which I really should start wearing because I like shorty socks in the summer, and I just think that's a beautiful, vibrant pink. It's a really fun pattern on the top. Cables and lace with a bit of texture in there, so they're really stretchy. And then this shawl I finished a while ago. It's knit tip to tip. You start on one end, and you work increases, and it makes it wider, and then there's like a little lace edging that you work at the same time. So we'll see if those designs get accepted. If not, then I might just publish them myself. And I've been working on a couple places have been accepting some submissions right now. Interweave Knits is releasing let me see, Art Nouveau inspired thing. So I submitted a design for a wrap with some sort of cable and lace leaf design. So I just sent that in a couple weeks ago. Or last week, I don't remember now. And Knit Picks is going to be releasing one about cables this winter. So I just sent this swatch to them with some cables for another wrap idea I had. So that's all I've been working on.
Let's get back over here.
Okay.
And Marina,
she has been making headbands. Oh, I've never made a headband. Are you making the kind that twists in the front? And that always seems like a really interesting technique. I haven't done that one yet.
Thank you, Kat.
I love the colors too, especially on those bright pink socks. And Marina is making baby hats for the hospital.
We're born too early.
Oh, that's really nice. I like that. I've been working on, I always carry knitting in my purse. And I knit when I'm at church too, but I made a rule for myself. I'm only allowed to do charity knitting when I'm at church. So right now I've been doing, excuse me, knitted knockers, which is really small and portable, and they're easy to knit. But it always comes up when somebody sees me knitting, they ask me what I'm knitting. So I tell them, and they're always fascinated that people knit those. But I think they're a great organization. So if you're not aware, knitted knockers you can knit. They're for people who've had mastectomies and they haven't had reconstructive surgery. So they're just small things that you can put in your bra to imitate your breast, of course. So I have never thought about knitting for the hospitals around here. I should check in and see if they take donations. But that's great, Marina. Hi, Franca. It's nice to see you here. Okay, and I do have a few books to recommend. Since I've been doing research into the knitting on Outlander, I've got a few of the knitting books. So let me show you those right now. Oh, Franca says there is an echo. Is anybody else hearing that echo? I'm not sure what it could be. I've got everything, I think, muted here. This book was just released, Outlander Knitting. Kate Atherley edited this book, and all of the designs are by various knitwear designers. And I think there's, the front of the book said there's 20 patterns, but I only count 19 in the table of contents here, so I'm not sure. It includes a lot of things that are like inspired by the show. Oh, that's a beautiful picture of Claire. Like these gloves, of course, she doesn't wear those gloves in the show, but it's sort of in her dress in this picture inspires that pattern. And then there's also those popular patterns that everybody loves, like Claire's cowl. Let me see, that's a better picture. So there's a pattern for that. So there's a good mix of the popular patterns from the series, and then also things that are just inspired by it. The beautiful Fair Isle vest that Frank wears. So there's lots of really nice things in there. And another one that's available is the Highland Knits. This one's from Interweave Press, and this one really, I think it's all of the patterns are inspired directly from things that were knit, that were in the show themselves. Oh, getting a glare. That's better. So there's a peek at the projects. The capelet, the Rent collection shawl. I know that's a really popular pattern. Let's look to that, see if we can find it right here. So a lot of the pieces that are in the show will have patterns in here. And that shrug. So if you like the Outlander knits, then these are some great options. Let me see. There I am. Okay, you can hear an echo. I'm not sure what it is. I've got everything muted here. So as long as it's not too bad, then I guess we'll just keep going. But the researching for Outlander is really neat. Some of those knitted, the knitted things in the show are beautiful, but they're very modern. You wouldn't have found them back in the early 1700s. Most of the knitting, like the gloves I showed at the beginning, were really fine work on small needles and really thin yarn. So those big chunky cowls and things, they probably didn't exist back then, but they're still beautiful, and I think they're a beautiful part of the show. But that's all I've been working on, and that's the books that we're going to talk about today. And let me see, we'll move on to the next thing on here. Last week's community question was about favorite scrap blankets, and if you had any. If you do, pop it down in the chat below and tell us about your favorite scrap blanket knitting patterns. I just released a video with some of my favorites, and we did have a few comments about that question. Margaret wants to do something that she can quickly add on to and doesn't require sewing up. And yeah, I agree. I don't like a lot of the sewing. I want really simple for scrap projects. And Franca says anything that doesn't bore her to tears. And we had another comment. I'm not sure, Frances Diane, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Frances Diane. But linen stitch would be a great blanket, and it would be like a woven blanket. That would be really nice. Okay. Franco, okay, you've got a question. Where can I get those books? I probably Amazon. I'm not sure in the UK where they would be available, but I think both of them are on Amazon or Interweave directly. I think the Highland Knits is an Interweave book, so they might have it available on their website. And Outlander Knitting, I'm pretty sure this is a brand new book. It was just released, so probably your local bookshop, or even if you have a yarn shop, they might be able to order it in for you. Okay, and let's go on to our next part. Nobody has any scrap blanket ideas that they recommend? We only had one question this week that was submitted ahead of time. Of course, I can answer your questions today if you have any. She wanted to know more about the writing assignments in the Master Hand Knitting program. So I thought I would chat a bit about that. There we go. Oh, Kaz has a recommendation for you, Franca, for the books. Look at EB for the book. Okay, so I only have the one question to answer. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll answer them after. But okay, so Garden Glory wants to know about the writing assignments in the Master Hand Knitting program. Now, I do want to say there is quite a bit of writing. So it really depends on how confident you are in your writing abilities, but none of it is really hard. I mean, level 1, you have to keep a list of references, and they tell you exactly how to format it. So it's not something you have to figure out yourself. They just want to know, like, well, say you work in Knit 2 Together and you don't do it correctly. They want to look at your references to see why you're not doing it the standard way.
So those references are just there for them to see what you've used to do your research, because this is a research heavy program. And if you just want to work, not just, if you want to just improve your knitting, you don't want to do all of the research, the other program, the Professional Hand Knitters program, also from TKGA, is a good choice. If you want to just focus on that, you don't want to do all of this research and writing. But if you want to be a knitting teacher or even a designer, this one has a lot of pattern writing and a lot of research. So that's the big difference between the two. It depends on what your end goals are. If your end goal is to improve your knitting without doing all of the pattern writing and the research, then the Professional Hand Knitter program is a really good fit for that. But if you want to teach, or if you just really like research, I kind of do. I mean, well, I'm a bit nerdy, then this is the program for you. But there is writing, and it can feel overwhelming if you're not used to doing a lot of writing, but you just take it step by step. Start with your references. They tell you exactly what you have to do, and each level builds on the next level. So in level 1, for example, you have one report, and I think they come out to about 3 or 4 pages long, the reports. And the report is on blocking your hand knits, which we're going to discuss today. And you also have swatches you're working. And with each of those swatches, you have an information sheet, and you put basic things on there, like what size needles you used for the swatch, the yarn you used. And then sometimes you have to write instructions for a technique. Like say they want you to write instructions for how you work make 1. You would write that out step by step as if you wanted to explain it to somebody who has never worked it before. So you are doing writing for that. There's a few worksheets where you're just filling things in, and you have questions to answer. And sometimes those require references as well, because they want to make sure that you know how to research. So having a few books on hand is really good. I really like Vogue Knitting and the Monsey Stanley's Knitter's Handbook are really 2 good ones to start with for level 1. And then level 2, it's more of the same things. You've got another report. This time it's on the history of knitting. And then you also have some book reviews, which end up being like maybe a page, maybe 2 pages total for each one. And they have some parameters on what types of books to review. And they even have a lot of suggestions in there's a Ravelry group for TKGA. And you can go in there and you can ask questions, and they offer lots of tips and advice on how to format or what to include in a review, things like that. They're not out there to like, they don't send it back edited. Like they're not taking a red pen to your report and telling you forgot a period or you spelled something wrong. They just want to know that you can research and put your thoughts together in a cohesive format. Because another thing, a lot of people who go through this program might decide to publish either books or write articles. So you need to know how to do your research and write reviews and reports. And then we have level 3, which is also a step up from level 2. This time you're doing some reviews, but it's 2 book reviews and then 2 magazine reviews. And there's 2 reports. One is you can select 2 different knitting traditions. Like I chose knitting in Fair Isle and Norwegian knitting, and I'm comparing those 2 types of knitting, like compare and contrast kind of paper. And the other report is on fibers that you use to knit, which has been really interesting. I'm really interested in all of the different types of fibers and how they work. And of course, your swatches and your questions. And then the 2 big projects, which I have not even started yet. I've started like looking at hat tam designs. I know it's going to be a Fair Isle hat, but there's no reason to be overwhelmed by it. You take it one step at a time, start with 1 piece. And especially if you haven't been writing very much, then it can feel overwhelming, but you've got a year, I think, a year and a half to complete the first level. So if writing is overwhelming, yeah, there's lots of help and advice in the different groups. There's a Facebook group now and the Ravelry group, and you can talk with others and even perhaps pair up with somebody else and read each other's reports and give some feedback. It's a good place to connect. So that was the only question this week. And Heidi has a question. Any suggestions for easy beginner baby hats, patterns, where to find? Does anybody have any suggestions for Heidi? Have you checked Ravelry? I know you can just go in there and search for, you can search by garment type and who it's for, if it's for a child or a baby or an adult. Another place is LoveCrafts. They have lots of really good patterns, lovecrafts.com. And I'm fairly sure you can divide them in the same way. Like you can search for hats and then go down further, adult, child, baby. Oh, and Kaz has a suggestion for you. She says YouTube has some. Yeah, YouTube is a great place to find patterns now too. So if anybody else has any suggestions for Heidi, go ahead and pop them in the chat if you have a suggestion for a baby hat. And if anybody else has any questions, go ahead and add them down there. I just want to chat about, I don't have any more questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I just wanted to focus on one question I see quite often. It's about blocking. I know this seems, I don't know why this seems like a controversial thing, but sometimes I'll be in a different group or like a Facebook group or something like that. And inevitably somebody will post, do you block your hand knits when you're done? And people will say, I've never blocked. And that always makes me laugh a little because I think we have a misconception about what blocking is. I don't know if it's the word, like if we just need to change the word or whatever, but it doesn't always mean you're like using pins and wires and mats and stretching things out as far as they'll go. Blocking is really only two things: how you get the project wet and how you let the project dry. That's really all it is. Because I'm assuming after you knit something, you probably want to give it a wash, whether that's in the washing machine, if it's washable, or hand washing, or if even hand washing feels like it would be too much on the fibers, then a little bit of steam or a light spray. Really, it's really just about caring for your finished project, and it does have a few benefits. It smooths and evens out your stitches. I don't know if you've ever knit anything in, oh goodness, like a cotton or any sort of plant fiber. Sometimes that just looks, or linen especially, that just looks like a mess when you're done with it. And a good soak can help all of those stitches even out and look a lot better. And it can be used to stretch things out with pins and wires if you have some lace that you want to open up, because lace is another one of those things can look a little ugly when it's just sitting on your needles, and it needs something to help it relax and stretch out and show it off. Or even stranded colorwork is another one. It looks lumpy and bumpy, and you need to give that a good soak. And then you do want to pull that out a bit to get those strands all flat and nice. But really, it just comes down to those two things: how you get it wet and how you let it dry. It doesn't have anything to do with pins and wires. It can, but it doesn't have to. If you've ever made a wool sweater and you soaked it by hand, or you put it on, I have a delicate cycle on my washing machine that doesn't agitate at all. So I use that a lot because it spins it out really dry. If you've washed something and then you've squeezed out the water and you left it on a towel or a mat or one of those mesh sweater hangers, and you just like sort of spread it out so it was flat and in its basic shape, and you let it dry, then you blocked your garment. So if somebody says they've never blocked, they probably have. They're thinking of that word in a different way. They're probably thinking of pins and wires and blocking frames, which are a thing. In the Fair Isle area of Scotland, they would have frames that they would put their sweaters on that would stretch them. So, but blocking doesn't always have to mean stretching. It just means washing and drying, how you wash it and how you dry it. So there are a few ways. Almost everything can be wet, can be put in water at some point, unless the fibers are very delicate. And sometimes, well, like if I'm knitting something like a lace shawl, it's really a pain to dunk it in water and then try to spread it out. So that one, I will pin it out and then I will spray it. But there are three methods of getting something wet. You can pop it right in your washer if it's washable, or on the delicate cycle, which is probably what I use for everything anyway. Or you can hand wash it in a tub of water. But if you don't want to get it wet, then there's also the steam option, which is really nice. when you want to just block something quickly without giving it a full soak. Or like lace, if you want to pin it out first and then spray it after and then let it dry. So that's the first step, is how you get it wet. And then the second step is how you let it dry. It can be as simple as just laying it out on a towel and just putting it in its shape. Or if it's a hat and you want the top to have that nice round shape, you could put it on a balloon or a beret or a tam over a dinner plate. There's lots of ways to just help them get their final shape. Or yes, you can use pins and wires, especially if you're doing something with lace. So I just felt the need to talk about blocking, because I feel like it's one of those misaligned terms that everybody's like, oh, I've never blocked. I don't, they probably have. They call it washing, because that's all it is. It's really just taking care of your hand knits. Okay. There. So thank you for listening to my diatribe about blocking. Okay, Heidi, you're going to look at LoveCrafts. You couldn't find any, beginner on Ravelry. Yes, there is a setting. If you scroll down through the side while you're sorting, like when you choose knitting and then you look at all of the accessories, you can choose your accessory down that left-hand column. There's a lot of choices on Ravelry for the different settings, like your fibers, where the pattern's found and all of that. And if you scroll down towards the bottom, there's one that has like difficulty level. And you can put, like, I think one of the options is piece of cake or beginner. That can help narrow it down. It's not a perfect fix because it depends on who selected that category for the pattern. I don't know how that works specifically. If anybody can say this pattern's easy, this pattern's hard, then, but it does help narrow it down a little bit. But LoveCrafts is a great place to look for patterns, and they have that similar feature where you can sort things. And Kaz, she knit a mini blanket and put it on a tower outside to let dry. That's great, especially that it's warming up out here, and it's a great way to use the sun. But I saw a picture this year of somebody who put their sweaters in the snowbank, and that's how she refreshed them. And I thought that was just a fabulous idea. Sometimes you don't need to, like your sweater, it just might, I don't know, have a faint smell from cooking or something, but it doesn't need a full hand wash. So a quick steam or something like that just to refresh it. But I loved that picture. I wish I could remember where it was. It was just awesome to see 3 or 4 sweaters just sitting in a snowbank and just getting refreshed. But the sun is good for that too. Oh, that's a great question. If you have arthritis in your hands and fingers, what is the easiest way to block? Well, wet block, it depends on the finished state where you want that garment to end up. Like if it's a lace shawl, then you've got to pin it out and all that. No matter what method you use, it's probably going to be a little harder on your hands. It's more about the project types, I think, and how much you need to stretch it. Simpler things, of course, you just wash. If you have a hand wash cycle on your washing machine, then all you have to do is put it in there and then take it out. And if it's something that doesn't need a lot of maintenance, just spread it out on a towel. That doesn't require anything extra. But I guess it really depends on the final state of your project. If it's something really delicate and lacy where you've got to open it up, then yeah, it's going to be harder on the hands. But the easiest thing to do with that is to pin it out while it's dry and then spray it. And then you can do a little at a time. But I hope that helps, Franca. Does anybody else have any questions? Not just about blocking, any knitting questions at all? And we do have a community question this week. There we go. If anybody wants to hop on over and answer that, you can go to the community tab on the Nerdy Knitting YouTube page. And I guess because I just finished a video about All Creatures Great and Small, and I'm working on one about Outlander, I thought it would be interesting to see if anybody knits things that they see from TV shows or inspired by that. So if you want to share your answers, you can hop over there, or when this live stream is over, I'll pin it down below. I'll pin a comment there and you can leave your response right there. or just pop it in right here if there's something that you've knit. A lot of people said they've knit things from Outlander, and a few, I think, from Pokemon, which I thought was neat. I haven't knit any toys or dolls. Has anybody here knit anything like that? Toys or dolls or small stuffed animals? I haven't done that, so I would be interested to know if that's something that is interesting to you guys. You're welcome, Franca. So we don't have any questions? Doesn't look like. Oh, Kaz. A sweater or a boxy top, beginner without sleeves. Oh, yes. I like those in the summer. It's like just 2 squares that you just sort of seam up the sides. There is one, I think it's called Cancun Boxy or Cancun on Ravelry. I've seen that one. It's a really lacy open work type one. And Expression Fiber Arts. She sells yarn, but she also has complementary patterns that goes with it. And I know that she has one as well. I can't remember the name of it. But if you go to her website, expressionfiberarts.com, maybe, I'm not sure. She's got one. It's just 2 squares. And you just seam the shoulders and seam the sides. And I've got some yarn. I actually bought some, let me see, it's hemp yarn. Oh, there's my screen. And I thought I was going to, it's really for market bags and stuff, but I thought it might be interesting for like a summer top, like a tank top or one of those, like you say, just that boxy summery top. So I'm going to give that a try. And Franca would love to knit things from programs, but don't know where to start. Well, yes, I have some advice for that. It's going to be in Friday's episode where I talk about the garments I like on All Creatures Great and Small. But at the end, I share some tips. One of the biggest things because you can sort of copy a pattern, not a pattern, you can copy a garment that you see on TV. But the biggest thing to look for is the way the sleeves are constructed. Like if the sleeve is set right into the garment, or if it's a drop shoulder, or if it's a raglan, because you can find a basic pattern that has that sweater construction, and you can change all the other stuff as long as you've got that basic. That's the major part of it. But I share more about that. So watch for Friday's video and you can take notes. It's really something you have to be adventurous, I think, to try something like that. But it can be really fun. Oh, and Kaz has some advice. Amy Florence. Was that for, for baby hats maybe? I'm not sure what that's referring to, but she has a YouTube channel here too, I think, doesn't she, Amy Florence? But it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Let me see, get back up on the screen here. So thank you for joining me today. It was great chatting with you. And if you have any questions that I haven't answered, or if you're catching the replay, you can leave your questions down below in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer them in our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks. Oh, for the boxy top. Amy Florence has one. Good. Oh, one more question. We'll answer that one. Franca, she'd like to learn to knit a sweater, but don't know where to start. My first sweater was Stacey Perry's Very Pink Knits. She's here on YouTube. She has a top-down raglan and a full tutorial that walks you through exactly how to do that. So I will, if you can go search for it now if you want, but I'm going to put a link for it down below too, because it was a great pattern, a great tutorial. She's got some really good tutorials, and that was my first sweater. And it's a really, top-down raglan is really easy construction to start with once you figure out how to put all your markers in and where you're working those increases and decreases. So I'll leave a link for that, Franca, or you can just go search. It's probably here on YouTube somewhere. Thank you. It was so nice talking to all of you. And for those who are catching the replay, if you have any comments or you have questions for the next episode, be sure to leave them down below. And if you want to catch more of these episodes, I'll put the playlist right here, and you can catch back episodes of the broadcast. Thanks for joining me today.